Hey everybody, Tony here with the review of Rossini's Le Comte Ory, which was shown at the La Scala Milan. The conductor was Donato Renzetti. The set design, scenography, and costumes were done by Laurent Pelli, and the chorus master was Bruno Cassoni. Now, this opera was the second to the last opera that Gioacchino Rossini composed, the last opera being Guillaume Tell. And this is actually one of his, last French operas that he composed. And this is an opera comique, a comical opera. But like a lot of Rossini's previous comical operas, they have a couple of things in common. First of all is the very challenging tenor role. Now, Rossini has composed a lot of roles for a tenore leggero or a lyric tenor that requires a lot of super high notes. I mean, notes beyond high C, but we're talking notes like C sharp, D, E flat, E, and even an F. So he basically composed a lot of really tough passages for the lyrico leggero tenore, or probably known in the era known as the bel canto tenor, usually tenors who specialize in bel canto. Now, if you thought the roles of Count Almaviva in Barbiere di Siviglia, Ramiro from La Cenerentola, Idreno from Semiramide, Lindoro from L'Italiana in Algeri are very challenging, oh boy. The Count Ory is another story. He has a lot of C sharps. Oh, and this role is also on par with Arnold and Rodi from Guillaume Tell, based on how tough their passages are, not to mention the very high notes they have to reach. So going to Le Comte Ory, his notes are very tough. He has to reach all those high notes and has to have very clean attacks. The other roles are also quite challenging as well. Countess Adele de Fumatier requires a lyric coloratura soprano with very great high notes and someone who knows how to navigate the florid coloratura lines. Isolier requires a coloratura mezzo who has also very good high notes and can also navigate very well with the florid coloratura. And the roles of the governor and Rimbaud need a lyric bass and a lyric baritone, or in some cases a dramatic baritone, both with very good high notes and very great low notes, who can also manage very difficult passages. Yet the role of Ragonda, though despite being quite difficult, seeing that she also has a little bit of florid lines to sing, her range sits very, very comfortably between the mezzo range and the contralto range. So this opera offers a lot of very interesting challenges for the singers. However, unlike a lot of Rossini's other operas like Barber of Seville, Guillaume Tell, Cenerentola, L'Italiana in Algeri, this opera hasn't really been performed too much. I mean, this has been performed at the Met starring Juan Diego Flores, Diana Damrau, and Joyce Di Donato, but you don't really hear a lot of people talk about this opera. I mean, whenever people think Rossini, they think, oh, he's the guy who composed Barber of Seville and William Tell, but never do they bring up the opera Le Comte Ory. You can say that it's one of those rare operas or those underrated operas that hasn't really been shown to the public a lot of times. But slowly, little by little, it's found its way to the mainstream audience since, well, probably I'd say the 40s or 50s. So, yeah, basically speaking, just like a lot of Rossini's other operas, it's very challenging. However, unlike a lot of his other operas, it doesn't really have the mainstream appreciation that it has today. Now, going into this review of this particular opera production, the production itself of Le Comte Ory was, well, to be very honest, quite questionable. Now, it's not horrible, nor is it so overly well, nor does it deviate too much from the original source material, but it's set in a more modern setting. I mean, Act 1 is set in like a high school auditorium, well, which is basically set in a high school gym with, or probably I'd say college, because, well, we don't really see these people dressing up like the usual teenagers. They dress up more like college students. I'd say this takes place in some college in the 1960s in the first act. And the costumes also reflect that era. And then we see the Count Ory in his first disguise. Well, in the original version, he's a hermit. Yet in this production, he's dressed in those stereotypically old world yoga gurus. And I thought, well, okay, it's kind of weird, but I can let it slide a little bit. I mean, it doesn't feel too out of place, nor does it feel too uncalled for. I mean, yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, he's basically dressed up as the typical or stereotypical looking hermit who is like a yoga guru. And instead of the young women who are so inspired by his teachings, they basically get their yoga mats and practice some yoga exercises, which I kind of thought was pretty funny. And the second act is basically set in a huge mansion, which is Adele's, Adele's home. And the problem that I have with both acts is the scenery. I mean, it's all black. I mean, of course, we get to see some furniture here and there and a little bit of scenery at times. However, why is it all black? I mean, come on, we need a little bit more scenery. However, this is Laurent Pelly that we're talking about. This guy basically specializes in a lot of minimalistic productions, as is the trend of a lot of European opera directors nowadays. So I don't think it's horrible. I think it's actually quite interesting. And I do like the costumes and some of the set pieces or props. However, there's kind of a lot to be desired because whenever I think Le Comte Ory, I usually think of more colorful scenery and more beautiful looking, very colorful costumes. I mean, if you want a really good example of what I'm talking about, well, you kind of need to look no further than the productions starring Juan Diego Flores, Diana Damrau, and Joyce DiDonato at the Metropolitan Opera. I mean, I don't have the DVD of it, but you can search for it on YouTube and you kind of will know what I mean. It's very colorful, and along with the costumes, it's a very colorful production. I don't know who did this production, but I kind of think that production, it seems to be a better production of choice than Laurent Pelly's minimalistic production. Like I said, I don't hate it, but it doesn't really seem to completely resonate with me, though it is pretty decent and it doesn't feel so shocking or shocking in a very unnecessary manner or shocking in a very tasteless manner. So it's still decent for me, though nothing to write home about. However, I will say that the singing was very excellent. In the role of Le Comte Ory, I finally found out who was singing this title role, is none other than Australian tenor Colin Lee. Now, Colin Lee is very well known for his high lyric tenor roles like Tonio from La Fille de Régiment, Almaviva from Barber of Seville, Leopold from La Juive, and many others. He also sang Arturo from Lucia de Lammermoor at the Metropolitan Opera House, starring Anna Netrebko and Piotr Byshala, in a production that I don't really care for, but the production may look pretty, but yeah, I'm kind of iffy about the singing, but that's another story. Anyways, his portrayal of Le Comte Ory was incredibly awesome. Sure, he kind of lacked a little bit of that caddishness that we find in The Count, but he was able to make up for it with a very smooth timbre, a very bright one at that, and very clean attacks on the highest notes, especially his C's, C sharps, and D's. They were all excellently tuned, and it was just a very beautiful instrument all around, and I can really see a future of more bel canto operas for this lyric tenor, and I really hope that he keeps his lirico leggero tenore voice in shape. It definitely is a beautiful sounding instrument. It has a lot of charm, energy, and just plain beauty and grace all around. It's definitely hard not to be so invested in both his performance as the Kaddish Count and also his vocality as well. It is definitely a very gorgeous instrument. The leading lady of this production was, well, the Countess Adele of this production was South African soprano Preti Yende. Now, Preti Yende is a soprano that I've seen a couple of times on YouTube. I saw her sing Juliet's Waltz song, and I thought it was a very charming rendition of that. She also sang O Suave Fanciulla with Andrea Bocelli, and I thought she was pretty good at singing Mimi's lines. And here, as Adèle du Fumetier, I thought she was just absolutely luscious in all of her notes. She has such a heavenly timbre. There are no gimmicks to her voice whatsoever. She sings the high notes with ease and clarity. Of course, there are those moments where some of the high notes come off as sharp, but she's still young. She still has time to let her voice mature. I mean, she's in her mid 20s, late 20s, and she still has time. She still has time for her voice to mature and let the notes, be more fuller in the near future. But as it stands, she is definitely a very fine performer in the role of La Comtesse de Dufumetier, and I thought her Emploi à la Tristesse and the Cabaletta Céleste Providence was excellently sung. It is such a flawless voice, and her acting is very involving. I mean, I especially love the scene in which she lets out a little shriek when she found out that, oh my god, the person that they have been entertaining all along was none other than the Count Ory himself. Oh my goodness, they have to go out of their way to, let him evade their castle once and for all. And I thought that was just excellently portrayed, both vocally and dramatically. She did a fantastic job. The other leading man, which is Anne Travestirol, on the role of Isualier the Page, was sung by Italian coloratura mezzo Chiara Amaru. Now, I haven't really heard of this coloratura mezzo, and I haven't really been so familiar with the material that she sings in. I mean, I heard that she sung Rosina in some Italian theaters, and even the role of La Cenerentola and many other coloratura mezzo roles, but other than that, I haven't really heard a great sample of her voice, and here I thought she was just thrilling. It is a very youthful, clear, and just simply put, heavenly sounding voice that almost sounds like a soprano in the best possible way. She has those clear, clean attacks on the highest notes of a mezzo, that being the high A's, high B flats, and the B's. She definitely has those clean attacks, and her stage presence as the youthful and ardent Paige Isualier was very, very charming. It just has a lot of charm and a lot of finesse and just so much beauty that she gave. She really gave it her all in this role, and I personally hope to hear more of her in the near future. I really hope that she gets signed in for more opera houses, more roles. I really hope to see her in Berlin one day. I don't know when that will happen, but I really, really pray that she'll be booked into one of those opera houses because she definitely has a very bright career ahead of her. And with a very fine voice, with such very solid, very clear sounding high notes, and such a very involving stage presence, this is definitely one of her best moments in opera. In the role of Ragonda, the nurse, this nurse was sung by Marina Deliso, another Italian mezzo, who has a very fine voice and has a little bit of a steelier quality than that of her other colleagues, Chiara Amaru. And her stage presence as Ragonda was quite involving as well. She has a very solid voice, and even though she doesn't have a great deal of high notes to sing, her voice was very well tuned all throughout, and her acting was very solid. So kudos to her for giving a very great representation of the role of Ragonda, even though it is kind of thankless, because, well, she doesn't really have a lot of high notes, nor does she have a lot of florid coloratura passages. But what a great Ragonda needs is great acting, and she certainly delivered. In the role of Rambal, we have Nicola Alaimo, who I also saw back in Berlin as Dulcamara from L'Elisir d'Amore by Gaetano Donizetti. And here, his voice was still in great shape. It still has that round, rich, and very, very virile timbre, and his notes were very spot on. His acting was fantastic. His comic timing was also fantastic, as he was not so hammy, nor did he act so clownish, but he was very natural in this role. I mean, he can do both comic and dramatic roles. That just shows you how versatile of a baritone Mr. Alaimo is. So kudos to him for giving such a great interpretation of Raimbal. In the role of the governor, we have Roberto Tagliavini, who is a young Italian basso, probably in his, well, early 30s, mid 30s, I don't really know. He is quite young, and he has a very promising career ahead of him. He has a very solid voice and great acting, but his voice really sold it for me. Sure, it's not powerful, nor is it very beautiful, but he is very musical. He definitely has clean attacks on all of the notes, whether they be the low notes or even the high notes. He definitely has very clean attacks, and his acting was very good all throughout, especially in the nun scene with Alaimo, Lee, and the members of the chorus of the La Scala Milan. I thought they were all fantastic, especially him. I mean, they were just fantastic. He was able to play the governor's only sane man nature very well, especially in the first act. So he did a very great job. In the smaller role of Alice, we have Italian soprano, light lyric soprano, Rossana Savoia, who in this small role gave it her all with a very fine voice and good acting. But more than anything, it's her voice that definitely sold it for me. It is a soaring, sweet, and very dulcet, light lyric soprano voice, and she's definitely fantastic in this repertoire. And in the smaller roles of Chiara and Menfoy, we have Massimiliano De Fino and Michele Mauro, who were basically part of the chorus in the second act of the opera. They sang very well, and they acted very well. So overall, the singing and acting were definitely very fantastic. Top tier, I might add. And the conducting done by Maestro Donato Renzetti was just equally as fantastic. he certainly paid such very close attention to how the lines should be done. Every diminuendo, every crescendo, everything was just well done. Especially the storm scene, which I seem to notice was also a staple in Rossini's comic operas. Almost a lot of Rossini's comic operas need a storm scene, which I thought was done very well. So overall, this production of Le Comte Ory was very great when it came to its cast of very, very great singers and very great conducting coming from Maestro Renzetti. Though the production definitely leaves a lot to be desired, I definitely recommend anybody who is interested or who's already been experienced with Le Comte Ory to give this production a try. For those of you who want a more traditional production, you might as well try looking on YouTube, or for those of you who want a more colorful production, well, just go look at the production with Flores, Damrau, and Di Donato. You won't be disappointed. And when it comes to this production of La Scala, you will never be disappointed with such great singing all around. This definitely was a great evening for all of the singers, and I definitely hope to see more of them in the near future. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in on Thursday where I'll be reviewing, not Thursday. Well, be sure to tune in on Tuesday where I'll be reviewing, what am I thinking? Be sure to tune in on Monday. Be sure to tune in on Monday where I'll be reviewing Così fan tutte, starring Maria Bengtsson as Fiordiligi, which is also going to be shown at the La Scala. So don't forget, tune in on Monday where I'll be reviewing Così fan tutte. So until then, this is Antoni signing off and wishing you all a good night.